That was great. You need to do it more often, Jeff. We all enjoy it very much. Junior high, senior high. I don't know what today is, but there's clipboards in the back. So. Today I want to talk a little bit about Thanksgiving, time coming up, end of the series in the book of Acts, and move right into some Thanksgiving suggestions is what I've called this. Thanksgiving suggestions. See, I think sometimes we just allow it to get lost in the shuffle of everything, but Thanksgiving is really my favorite holiday. Now, I want you to understand it's certainly not because of the turkey, all right? Because if you're not aware, I'm allergic to turkey, so it's not because of the turkey, but Thanksgiving is that holiday that marks, it's different than all the others. All the others kind of bring a remembrance of an accomplishment. If we was to talk about Easter, what's the accomplishment? The resurrection, right? We'd talk about the resurrection. If we want to talk about Christmas, we think about the birth of Christ. If we want to talk about the 4th of July, we're going to talk about an accomplishment, independence of our nation, and all that would go with that. November the 11th, we'd talk about our veterans. In May, it'd be Mother's Day. In June, it'd be Father's Day. But Thanksgiving's just different. Now, everyone catch this because I'm about to throw you a little curve here. Thanksgiving is personal. It's about me. So thank you all very much for sharing my holiday. But Thanksgiving is about me. I'm convinced of that. Now, why is that? Well, I think it's a time whenever we need to take inventory of our life, that we need to do a little review, and we'll start reviewing the things that is in our life. About me realizing that I've had struggles and battles. Anyone else besides me have struggles and battles? Well, of course you do. We all have them. Yet, it's about me not forgetting the help and the blessings that I've had from God, as well as from my brothers and sisters in the Lord. It's about me realizing that in spite of all those difficulties and all those hardships and all the disappointments and all the mistakes, I have so many reasons to be thankful. In spite of all those things. In spite of things that I have done that haunt me, in spite of the things that I have allowed into my life, in spite of my failures, in spite of so much. I have so many reasons to be thankful. But sometimes Thanksgiving is lost in that shuffle between Halloween. How many of us can remember when we didn't decorate for Halloween? Okay, most of you can. Well, there's houses that I see now that are decorated more for Halloween than for Christmas. I find that pretty amazing, There's one I saw where there was literally ghosts coming out of everywhere. And it looked real enough that I wouldn't drive down that street. Yeah, we decorate for Halloween. And then there's Black Friday. I really appreciate Black Friday this year. It started the first Friday after July. Most of us have noticed those things. The world has changed. Now, I didn't even know what Black Friday was until a few years ago. And Deb and the kids decided to get up and go shopping. Then I realized, man, this is a black day. And then Christmas. So Thanksgiving gets lost in all that shuffle. Well, this year, I want you to take a deep breath. All right, now chill. Kind of catch your breath here for a minute. And I want you to be thankful. So today, I'm going to try to give you a sermon that I hope will work all the way through Thursday for you. I've got 5 suggestions that I want to give you that I hope will help you have a Thanksgiving Day review. So as you sit down at the Thanksgiving dinner, wherever you might be and whoever you might be with, first of all, this is the part that is unscriptural, so I'm going to tell you to do it anyway. Shut off the TV, all right? The football game will be there when you're done eating, or whoever's saving Christmas. Deb has. I want you to understand there's 10 different ways to save Christmas, and she's watched all 10 of them. And it's not even Thanksgiving. So all those Christmas shows are already out. Turn it off for the Thanksgiving dinner, all right? Here's the things I want you to do. Very first thing, number 1, I want you to share a table. Deuteronomy chapter 8, verses 10 and 11 is going to say this: when you have eaten and are satisfied, praise the Lord your God for the good land he has given you. Be careful that you do not forget the Lord your God. Most of us are going to have a Thanksgiving Day dinner. We're going to share a table either with family or friends or with both. There's going to be a time whenever we're going to enjoy that celebration there. So start with remembering God and praising Him. If you do not have a prayer every time you have a meal, well, you should, but if you don't, I want you to make a special effort to come around that bountiful table, and I want you to take a good hard look at that table and see all that is there. Now, if it's like most homes, here's what you're going to see. There's going to be sacred bird on that table. All right, that's turkey this year. You're going to see that turkey there. There's going to be a little ham. There's going to be all sorts of vegetables. And over here in the corner is going to be a dessert table. Does that describe it for most people? And if you are a family, there's going to be the big table for the adults and the little table for the kids. Sound like home? Well, of course it does. Yeah, that's how we all grew up, and that's the things that we know. The very first thing I want you to do before you ever take the first bite, I want you to look at that table, and then I want someone to have a prayer. I want it to be a prayer of thanksgiving. God, thank you for the bounty that's on our table. Because that table is greater than any place else in the world this year. We are in the most blessed land in the world. And that table will be greater than any other table spread throughout all the rest of the world. So I want you to take a moment and give thanks. I want you to look at that table and look it over in the bounty. I want you to look around and see that there's family and friends. I want you to think about the family that is there. And then I want you to think about the family that's not there. I want all of you to take a moment and to appreciate. You know, I think about our family, and we've gone from being the ones that were sitting at the little table to the ones that now are the grandparents. Many of us have made that journey. Many of us have made those changes. So as you're sharing that table and you're looking at the young ones over at the other table, just realize in just a few short years, they're sitting at the big table. And you pushing up daisies. The world's going to change. You may not like it, but it's going to change. And it's going to happen. I cannot help but remember those days as you. So I want you to look around and be thankful. So as you share that table and you start with the meal and you start with the prayer, I want you to realize the greatness and the majesty of our great King, the Lord of Lords, the God of Gods. I want you to take a moment and appreciate being at that table. The next thing I want you to do, number 2, is I want you to share your conversion. Wow, think about that. Share your conversion. Let's go over to Acts chapter 3. In Acts chapter 3, verse 19. Here's what conversion is about. It says, repent and turn to God so that your sins may be wiped out and the time of refreshing may come from the Lord, and that He may send the Christ who has been appointed for you. That's verse 20. Even Jesus. I want you to share your conversion. Now, most people, we get out of sharing our conversion. The conversion story of each person, though, is very important. And sometimes our children and our grandchildren need to hear that conversion story of what it was like. Now, if you was to go to John chapter 1, in John chapter 1, starting about verse 35, you're going to find some of the conversion stories. Andrew, what do we know about Andrew's conversion? Well, he'd been following John, and now he's following Jesus. And what was the very first thing that Andrew did? He went and got his brother and told him the good news. And who was his brother? Simon, a guy called Peter. And he would share the good news with him. So we would hear about their conversions. Then there would be this guy Philip who would join along, and then Philip would talk about Nathanael. And Philip would go tell Nathanael, and Nathanael would say, well, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Can anything good come out of there? And the next day, what happened? Jesus says, I'm the good that's come out of there. And poor old Nathanael said, I didn't mean it. Can you imagine the conversion story that is told? Paul's conversion is recorded for us in the book of Acts, but then he tells it 2 other times. As he would say, I was on the road to Damascus, and while on the road to Damascus, a great light would come and knock me to the ground. I want you to share your conversion story. your conversion story. Each one of you have a very unique conversion story. Now, if I was to ask for a show of hands, some of you would say, well, my conversion was pretty automatic. I grew up in the church. Mom and Dad had always been here. They had taught us. They had instructed us. And just one day, boom, it happened. I come down the aisle. God bless you. What a powerful testimony. But some of you would say, you know, it was a dark time in my life. It was a time whenever things weren't really good and I needed help, and all of a sudden God was there and He gave me the help that I needed. That's a conversion story that your children and your grandchildren will need to hear, and it need to be passed from generation to generation. I want you to talk about that conversion and how meaningful it was for you that day. Because there's going to be young ones around, or there's going to be friends that don't understand all that has been done. So the day that God come into my life, oh, I can remember the day that God come into my life very well. And I've told you many times, my conversion wasn't automatic. I waited a long time before I did it. But Grandma Pickle didn't give me much choice. Now, do you think my kids don't know that story? Well, yes, they do. They know all about Grandma Pickle and her diary and praying for Mike to be the preacher. And lo and behold, you've been stuck with me all these years. You owe that to Grandma Pickle. Or you can be mad at Grandma Pickle, however it might work. But that's an important thing. I can remember the conversion of Mikey. Now, Mikey, here he is, a preacher, and he's doing well, but he was 6 years old, and he started saying, I want to be baptized. Well, now, the difference between him and most 6-year-olds, he had not missed church or Bible study in 6 years. Dad always had him right there with him. By the time Mikey was 6, he had already made missions trips to Cookson Hills. I can remember those things. Now, it's important that the generation after you will remember that. Now, how was it that Grandma come to know the Lord? Or how was it that Mom or Dad or Aunt or Uncle come to know the Lord? I want you to share that this Thanksgiving. And then after you've shared, I want, whether it's with your family or whether it's with a friend, see, they may need to hear that. They may need to know that, wow, this wasn't automatic for you. That you had to work at this. And then all of a sudden, as you're sharing that story, can you imagine the Apostle Paul as he stood before King Agrippa and said, now, King, I was on my way to Damascus. And on my way, boom, I got struck by light. That light was powerful. It knocked me down. It looked like a semi coming at me. And King Agrippa said, what's a semi? All right, just making sure you're awake. So you kind of get the idea. Share it and be glad about it. The gospel and the Acts are filled with people coming to Christ who are sharing their conversion stories. Recently we talked about Lydia down by the river. We talked about the jailer and his conversion story. Do you remember who baptized you? Now here, that could be a loaded question, because here we're one of those places where the preacher's not always the one who baptizes you. Some churches it's only the preacher. But here it can be another member. And that's good, because it's not limited to just preachers. There's nothing holy about me holding up my right hand, folks. There's nothing about that. It's about all of us who are walking with the Lord. You ever notice years back, I'm going to take you back to an early Thanksgiving. For all of you who were in the church 50 years ago, do you ever see a preacher baptize someone without raising the right hand? That never happened. They always raise their right hand. I always laughed about that. I thought, why are they doing that? Well, we found out we don't have to do that. It's not in there. So I want you to find reasons to be thankful. And I want you to share that conversion. Whenever you were growing up, did you walk with the Lord? Or did you walk outside of Him? I asked you last week to not think about yourself just being Christian. I wanted you to think about yourself walking every day with God. While you was growing up, did you walk with Him? Did you find that you were walking with Him in some of your most difficult days? Now, you don't have to, sometimes people elaborate on the difficult days. I was such a rotten sinner. Oh, good. But I want you to go, I was having a dark day, and God brought a light into my life. A new light into my life that was never there before. I suspect there will be people at the table that will want to hear that story. Romans chapter 12, it will say this. Therefore, I'm going to start a verse earlier. Therefore, I urge you, brothers, in the view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, and you'll understand it, His perfect will. I want each of you to share that, because I want you to be transformed and renewed. Transformed and renewed. Those days, whenever you stepped out and come down the aisle, that was a transforming experience. It changed your life. I don't care how old you were. You could have been 6 or you could have been 60. That day was designed to change your life, and you was transformed. I want you to renew Thursday at your table that transforming. I want you to go back to that day. I don't believe there's a single one of you that just did it automatically. I think you'd given it some thought. I think you had considered it. I think that some of you were literally holding on to the back of the pew, hoping that the invitation wouldn't go any longer. Because if it goes any longer, I'm going to have to step out. And I think some of you were those people. I want you to renew those thoughts of how special that day was. So I want you to talk about your conversion. Your conversion. And I want you to remember it and appreciate it and be glad. Conversions are important. I remember the preacher that baptized me. I remember the whole scenario. I can remember it was May 10th, 1970. I can remember every aspect of it. I can remember those saying, if the Lord will accept him, He'll accept anybody. And I can remember that. I can remember the change that came into my life. I hope never to be to a place where I can't remember that. The next thing I want you to do, number 3, is I want you to share a family story. Let's go over to the Psalms. In Psalms 107, verse 22. Here's what it's going, 21 and 22. Let them give thanks to the Lord for His unfailing love and His wonderful deeds for men. Let them sacrifice thank offerings and tell of His works with songs of joy. Unfailing and tell of His works. Share a family story from years past at your Thanksgiving table this year. Share a family story from years past. Now, why would I suggest that? Whenever Israel would gather together for the Passover, whenever Israel would come together for any celebration, they would remember what? Well, they would remember stories of the Exodus. Now, that Exodus had taken place hundreds of years ago, but probably one of the patriarchs of the family would start saying, and now when Grandpa will come out of Egypt. And they would start telling the stories of the Exodus. And they would talk about how God had done these marvelous works. And how God had worked miraculously against Pharaoh. Now they were telling stories of the past. They were sharing victories that had taken place in God. Or they may be talking about Abraham. Whenever Abraham come out and God said, I will make you a nation. And he would talk about all that would be done. Do you think there wasn't those stories of David and Goliath that were shared around those tables? Oh, we want to tell you about our King of Kings. And his favorite was David. And that David, just as a boy, went out and would slay a giant. And who do we think gave him that power? The God that has brought us together here today. And that God had given him an ability to be able to see that the victory belonged to the ones following God. What about poor old Daniel in the lion's den? Even the king didn't want Daniel in the lion's den. You all remember that? The king didn't even want him there. He had been tripped up by some of his high officials. And they had tricked him into making a law that was only going to apply to Daniel. Now, do you think that wasn't talked about at those celebrations? So I want each of you now to think about something in your past that was so very special. Whenever I think about my past, you all know I think about Grandma Pickles' house. It was so very special to me. And I can remember all the family getting together and the great big table. You know, we didn't have indoor plumbing, but we had a table that would go from here to the Welcome Center. Yeah, it was a special place. And no one could cook quite like Grandma. Deb used to ask her for a recipe, and she'd say, well, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Those were special days. And I would remember my cousins, and I can remember Grandma having the prayer, and I can remember her calling on, as I've mentioned before, my dad or Uncle Stanford to pray. And they didn't have much choice. They better pray. Those are wonderful memories of family stories. I can remember whenever there was times that it was so hard to get to her house, she didn't live anywhere convenient. And it was special. I can remember sitting back and listening to Grandma tell stories about Bethel. That's the church where her dad and where my Grandpa Pickle had gone. And I'd listen to her tell stories about how that old church started, and used to, it was just us women keeping it going. I can remember those stories. I can remember the stories from the Sweeney side when they'd talk about Rock Branch Baptist Church. And I knew it was Rock Branch Baptist. We went there once a year. My dad had put a little white jacket on me, and off to Easter we'd go. And I'd hear those stories. Now, folks, each of you have got stories just like that. Now, some of us are old enough to remember stories that were passed down to us from our parents who were World War II veterans. I can remember Dad telling me about a Thanksgiving service in England. I think about it regularly. See, those are blessings, folks, that we are letting get away. I want you to share them. Share a family story, because the generation after you needs to hear it. Now, how important is that? What if the Israelites had not shared the story of the Exodus? What if they'd not shared the stories of David? What if they'd not shared the stories of Daniel, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego? What if they hadn't shared those stories? We might read them and we might not, but because they were passed down generation to generation to generation, they've been recorded for us. Now, each of you have stories that your family needs to hear that are so very important, of times that have been spent together. I can remember preaching at Bethel, the church that I mentioned. I can remember one of the elders saying, Deb, I've got a turkey for you. I can remember us going after that turkey, and he had a name. And he was up walking around, and he said, there's the axe. And I can remember killing that turkey, and Deb said, we're not eating that thing. I can remember that well. You ever try to give away a turkey without a head that still has feathers? It's just hard to do. They're good memories. I want you to share a blessing. Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 15. Through Jesus, therefore, let us continually offer to God a sacrifice of praise, the fruit of our lips that confess His name. I want you to continue to offer praise. So that means share a blessing. I will share my blessing with all of you today. I am really blessed. Latonia Christian is my happy spot in the world. All right? I'll just tell you, my happiness is Latonia Christian. Oh, I'm blessed with a great family, but Deb will tell you, I'm here. This is where I'm at. I love the place, and I love each of you, most of you. I'm richly blessed. Richly blessed. I want you to share a blessing. I want you to share a blessing that God has done in your life. Maybe it's a health blessing. Maybe there's been a change in your health, and now it's turned around and it's going in the right direction. Maybe it's a blessing that has come unexpectedly. Unexpectedly. Maybe you got a gift that you weren't anticipating giving or getting. Or maybe you've been able to give a gift that you had not anticipated giving. Maybe there's a blessing that has come your way because you were able to see something that you have been praying for a period of time develop. Thursday, I want you to share a blessing with everyone at the table. I want you to be able to look at them and say, you know, I have been richly blessed this year. My harvest has been bountiful. I've seen God working in this way for me. I've seen God use me here. I've seen God open doors that I didn't think could be opened. I want each of you to share a blessing. And I want you to think about how that blessing has been in your life. I want all of you to realize the very importance of that. As I started out, see, folks, we each have difficulties. We have failures. We have hardships. We have disappointments. There's not a single person here that doesn't have a blessing. We've all been blessed in one way or another. Now, I can count my disappointments and my failures, or I can count my blessings and name them one by one. And I'll rejoice in what the Lord has done. And I want each of you to do that. Finally, I want each of you to share with rejoicing. Share with rejoicing. This is my favorite psalm. If I was to pick one verse, this would be it. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Let us rejoice and be glad today in what He has given us. I want you to continue realizing a rejoicing is needed. And as you share, you will rejoice. We should not need to be reminded to give thanks. We should not need to be reminded to give thanks, because God has worked in every life here. Sometimes my burdens are very heavy. I often carry my own burdens that I have trouble letting go of, and I often carry your burdens, because I will know of something going on in your life and it'll just trouble me, and I will be greatly concerned about it. I've got some of you that have been on my prayer list for a long time, and some of you, if you just make a decision, I could mark your name off. But I've got people that I have prayed for. I've got people that I'm expecting to make decisions. I've got some of you that I know have issues in your life, and I pray for you. Sometimes my burdens are very, very heavy. And you say, well, you don't have to do that. You're right, I don't. But I do. It's just who I am. That's why I've been your preacher for 110 years. I just can't get over worrying about you. But I don't have to be reminded to give thanks. Even with every burden that I carry, there's not a day that I don't get up and want to say, thank you, God. Thank you for the opportunity to be at Latonia. Thank you for the opportunity to serve you. Thank you for the victory that we had yesterday. Thank you for the decision that that person made. Thank you that I see that family turning around. I want you to share and rejoice and be glad. Rejoice and be glad this Thanksgiving. Now, I know Friday is coming, and I know some of you have already got your alarm clock set, and some of you are already headed out to the store. But Thursday, take a deep breath and chill for a minute. And turn to the Lord and say, this is your day, and I'm going to rejoice in it. And I'm going to share all that Brother Mike has asked me to do. I've got family and friends around the table. I want to tell you about the day that I stepped out and come down the aisle. I love history. I love having all the bulletins and the church papers that I do for so many years. And I love looking back, and every once in a while I'll look back and see who made a decision and when you made it, and then I'll go look it up and see what I can learn about you. What was taking place at Latonia Christian on that day? We have reasons to rejoice. So I want you to tell those stories. I want you to share your table. I want you to share your conversion. I want you to share your family stories. I want you to tell of the blessing that you've had this year. And then I want you to rejoice and be glad that you've had that day with everyone at that table. You know, look around. As you look around that table, you're going to think, these have been my friends for 40 years. This has been my family. And I say thank you. Will you all please stand as we have our invitation?